Welcome to episode 32 of Rubbish Talk with myself, Alistair Meldrum, and just myself because Jane Bond is currently sunning herself in Dubai. She does join us later on for our chat with our guest this week, who is Duncan Simpson of Duncan Simpson Associates. But before we get on to the usual roundup of news from myself, so the first one that caught my attention, it was actually somebody at the gym that highlighted this one to me, is the repair cafe in Glasgow, where you can take all your broken things last Saturday of every month, and they will repair your clothes, or they'll repair small appliances, garden tools, jewellery, electronics and toys. And this person that was down to the gym went up, and I think it was a handbag that got sorted out. And as it happened, when they were up there, they managed to rip their jacket, and they got that repaired as well for, you know, next to no money. It's all voluntary run in terms of the people doing the work. It's really well organised, and they do tea and coffee and cake as well, and soup, all organised by the volunteers. So if you're in the Glasgow area and looking to get things repaired rather than throwing them out, then maybe there's a wee opportunity there. As usual, I'll put the link, or we'll put the link up in the show notes if anybody's interested. Now, I believe there's also the repair cafe in Glasgow is modelled on other ones around the country, so it's not just Glasgow that's got them. So have a look and see if there's any other ones in your area. Next thing that caught our eye was our previous guest, Laura Young, on episode 17. She was announced as the Scottish Influencer Awards as the Influencer of the Year Award 2024 for all the work she'd done in terms of campaigning against disposable vapes. So well done to Laura for that award. And talking about vapes, they have sprung back into the headlines again with the UK Vaping Industry Association. So this is the organisation that represents vape suppliers, resellers and so on. They have come out with a report to criticise local authorities for not doing enough to recycle their vapes. And many of us in the industry think the UK vaping industry have got a bit of cheek, that they're putting millions of products onto the market. They're not taking the responsibilities in terms of the waste, electrical and electronic regulations properly. They're not providing any take back, or they're very grudgingly providing take back, and they've got the cheek to actually criticise local authorities. And quite rightly, various groups have gone back and criticised the UK vaping industry for this approach, where they're trying to push the blame on to other people. So again, we'll share the links to these. There's actually been numerous, so maybe share a few links if anybody's interested in keeping up to date. And the other thing in the news recently was the budget last week. Obviously, the headline thing for the waste management sector was the landfill tax was increased from £103.70 a tonne to £126.15. It's a pretty significant jump of £23 almost. And the lower rate, it's also gone up from £3.30 to £4.05. Now that obviously only applies in England because landfill tax is devolved to Scotland, so it's whether Revenue Scotland will follow suit in the next year. So that's the rise in April 2025, so not this April, is for next year, April. So what's been talked about before is it's really hard for Scotland to have a different rate of landfill tax, because all you'll do is encourage waste tourism across the border. So Scotland's cheaper, then waste will come into Scotland. If Scotland's dearer, then waste will just move south across the border. So generally, whatever UK government set the rate, then that's what happens in Scotland. Other sort of lesser things, well, I think in terms of the increase in landfill tax rate, I think the industry probably welcomes the increase, because that makes things like recycling probably more cost effective. But it does add extra pressure onto the waste crime sector, because it's even more profitable to not handle your waste properly. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword for the waste sector. So it should make recycling cheaper or more competitive, but it also increases the pressure on the waste crime side. The other things that came out was the plastic packaging tax is to rise by the CPI, and the aggregates levy is to rise by the RPI. And there's also plans to levy a tax on vapes. So that looks like the government looking at if they're going to ban, or they are going to ban, disposable vapes. They're obviously thinking that the producers will then switch to reusable vapes, and I think the government's looking at trying to tax these. So that's the main headlines from the UK budget last week. So enough news for me. Just a little couple of Albion bits of news. Just a reminder to everybody, we do have a news aggregator site which collates waste industry news, environmental news, and health and safety news. You can access it via the Rubbish Talk website. And we also have a newsletter that goes out with the podcast, just sharing these links straight to your email inbox. So if you're not on that distribution list and you'd like to be in a distribution list, just drop us a little note. And finally, we have our 1-day and 2-day REHIS courses running again in the spring. So that's the Introduction to Waste Management Legislation course, which is a 1-day course, and that's the 16th of May. And we have the 2-day Working with Waste Management Legislation course, which is the 29th and 30th of April. If you need information of that, it's on the Albion website, or contact the office and we can get you more details. So that's it for me. Myself and Jane Bond, before she hurriedly departed to the sun in Dubai, had a really interesting chat with Duncan Simpson. Duncan Simpson has been around for probably as long as me, if not longer. He started his career in local authority. He then worked for Valpak for many years, and latterly he set up his own business, providing consultancy for the waste sector. A really interesting chat with Duncan about all things waste management.
Hi Duncan, how are you? It's nice to see you again, or nice to hear you again.
It's great to see you as well. I'm very well, very well.
Good. And so what have you been doing recently with your work and background, what you've been doing for the last, I don't know, few years? Because I was going to say nominally retired, but not really, are you?
No. So I had to look up before I came on when I left Valpak. So Valpak I was at for 22 years. I set up on my own in May 2020.
Wow, I didn't realise it was that long ago.
Yeah, it's mad how fast that time's gone. But I guess I left and then set up, and then immediately COVID happened, which we all planned for really well. So in terms of setting up RMAS, the Resource Management Association Scotland, to give SMEs in the sector a voice, continue to do the work with Switch. I'm also a trustee of CIWM at the moment. And in terms of the kind of day-to-day work, I lived in that fear of imposter syndrome of leaving a company, setting up my own, and then thinking, what if I'm rubbish? What if nobody calls? Was delighted that the phone rang the next day. So I've done some work for clients in terms of market assessments, in terms of looking at business ideas, business planning for new start businesses, strategic planning, done some work in collaboration with, in fact, yourselves. We did some of the work with the NHS, worked with Nikki on a number of different projects. And overall, I've been delighted with the work coming in a range of subject areas, a range of interests. And but it's an industry that, it doesn't stop in terms of its interest to me. I like it a great deal.
Yeah, no, I would probably agree. So is it that the most of the stuff you're doing, is that relating to packaging or general?
No, of course, I always get asked about packaging. I get asked about packaging, PRNs, producer responsibility. But I was always worried that it would become too narrow. You'd become too nerdy. So I've tried to widen it out from there, but to understand packaging and to understand the role it plays, why people focus on it for legislation, you need to understand all of the other waste streams. So, and I was lucky at the start of my career, I was one of the first recycling officers in Scotland. So I started from grassroots up in terms of how do you get recycling to happen? How do you engage people in it? How do you get the infrastructure out there? And that gives you a wider understanding of waste. And I guess I was also lucky in, I started in a city at Dundee, and there was a blueprint for what they wanted to do. And they had a landfill and they had household waste recycling centres, or CA sites, or skip sites as they called them then, an energy from waste plant. They had the whole range of facilities, and then I moved from there up to Gordon District, which obviously gave me a semi-rural area to operate in that had a big drag on it from the city, and it was trying to do its own thing, and also it didn't necessarily use its own disposal. It worked in partnership with Shanks and McEwen as they were at that time, which was interesting to me. So I've been lucky that I've had both public and private, and also because I think most local authority officers end up to get asked to do everything. So you pick up lots of skills on the way: marketing, communications, design ideas, operations, time study, all sorts of stuff. It's kept a range of stuff in my head, and I'm naturally interested in the subject as well. I enjoy it. I bet you were thinking, oh, we need 4 hours for this bloke because we won't stop talking about the things he's interested in.
Yeah, I guess it's a wide range of things that you've done, and that kind of it is quite. I find it quite interesting because I'm going to say people of our age, Duncan, we've kind of started right at the very beginning when recycling was sort of trying to kick off, when landfill was the big thing, and we were lining landfills at that point, and now the way everything's changed, but you still fundamentally, waste is waste, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I looked up before I came, I can remember I priced up paper recycling Gordon District as it was at the time. And I remember going to my boss at the time, George Niblock, who's a shrinking violet of an individual, and saying to him, I'd like to do some paper recycling, George. It's going to cost us about £47 a tonne. And at that time, you could landfill waste for £6. So I know you said people of our age, but we're not that old, Jane. But if you think of the difference between the £6 now and what is it, 100 and something odd quid tax alone, which you then add the 30 quid operational charge onto, the difference in terms of the economics is quite something. It's the cost of everything has gone up as well.
Taking you a wee step back, Duncan, how did you make a right turn into waste management in Dundee then?
I have an older brother. He's 2 years older than me, and when people say to you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I just had no idea. So at school, I picked the subjects that my brother did. And I was lucky. I came from quite a privileged background that both my parents were in good jobs. I went to a good school, but I picked all the sciences, and I was rubbish at them. I mean, I got a 0 in my physics exam. I think I managed to write my name on the top of the paper. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but at the end of it, I remember thinking, you're a bit of a numpty. I don't know what I want to do. And I sat down with my mother, and she said, well, what do you like? And I said, I like being outside. I like people, and I like the countryside, which I think I was saying environment. And she came up with 3 ideas. She said, what about Securico? That's outside. That was a bit of a tangent. And I thought, no thanks. She then said, what about the voluntary overseas services? And she gave me an address, and I wrote saying, my name's Duncan Simpson. I'd love to work for you. Happy to do anything. Didn't hear anything from them for a wee while. And there was a job for the Ordnance Survey, which was maps. And I love maps. I like looking at maps. I like drawing. I think they're really clever things if you can interpret them. So anyway, I joined the Ordnance Survey, and I went down to Southampton, and I trained to be a cartographic surveyor. And then I got posted to Rosyth, and I literally put Dalgety Bay on the map, because at that time you used to go out with a board and a map and survey with a measuring tape, and then come back and draw everything up. And I loved it. And I learned to do surveying from aerial photography. I loved that as well. But it became very boring and repetitive. And all of the jobs, the big jobs, you know, go and remap Skye, go and remap the Highlands. It was all done. I was doing infill. So anything over 30 centimetres that wasn't there before, put it on the map. So lots of housing estates and roads. And I also knew I love geography, and in the end I kind of sat down, and my dad sent me to go and see his HR director from the place my dad worked, and he said, "Tell me about what you've done." And I said, "Well, it was a bit of a ding-a-ling at school, and I tried to follow what my brother did, and I was rubbish at that, and I'm not very good at stuff." And he was like, "That it's just such a depressing story. Can you not basically turn that around to what you have achieved?" And then he said, "Why don't you go to uni and ask them?" So I did town and regional planning at Dundee, and I got all the way through to the third year. And in the third year, we visited the Netherlands, and I went to Amsterdam and Nijmegen, and I thought, wow, look at how they do planning here compared to how we do planning in the UK. To me, planning in the UK is like blind battleships that you pay £1 million for on a big development and say, "Can I build that there?" Pay your money, do all the research, and then the politicians say no. Whereas in the Netherlands, they attract you to areas. They say, "This is where our environmental park will be. This is where the energy hub will be. This is where the transport, and this is the historic town centre. We keep it this way." So I stopped at that stage and thought, you really need to think about what next. So like all good Scots, I went and worked in a pub.
As you do.
And when I was in the pub, I did a second degree, which is a master's in technology management, and I specialised in risk management and waste management. But also at the time, I was watching them put out glass, put out various materials, and I was thinking, I wonder what happens to all that stuff, and that would be quite interesting. Why does the boss think about it in this way? What about the returns that go back? And anyway, I did my dissertation on Dundee, which was the UK's Scottish recycling city at the time. And I did work for them on who recycles what, why, where, when, what motivates them to do it, what should the authority be doing. But they also really kindly employed me while I did my dissertation, and the typing pool wrote it up, if you can believe that, for me. They typed it up. But I put out the first 5,000 bin composting scheme. I put out their blue bin, paper bins, and I swapped the glass from a mixed glass collection to 3-colour, and I introduced a charge as all part of the dissertation work. So Dundee really gave me a break into the sector on my dissertation, and then I wrote back to them for every single job that came up until they gave me a job, because I decided I wanted to be the recycling officer there. But I applied for bin men and road sweeper jobs and drove them bananas. And then eventually the recycling officer's job came up, and it was an amazing place to go to start. So that's how I got into it. It was part deliberate, part a mixture of these are the things I like to do, and luck. But once I was in it, like most people in it, I was addicted.
And Dundee at the time was quite quite advanced, really, wasn't it, in terms of what they were doing?
Yeah, I mean, Dundee, if you can imagine, Dundee had an environment team. It was a team of I think about 10 women that would go out into the nurseries, into the primary schools, into the secondary schools and colleges, and they would talk about the reason for recycling, the problems created by waste. They would link it to bigger environmental issues. I had a marketing officer, Derek Selway, which, I mean, can you imagine a cleansing department with a marketing, communications, promotions officer now? Not at all. It had its own engineering department because of the landfill and the energy from waste plant, which Alistair Lamont was in charge of. And I love engineers because they're just incredible in what they can make and fix and tell you why something's happening in a certain way. And they were just a great team. And they had, as part of winning that Recycling Cities funding, to follow a plan to put out a 3-bin system. And my job was to get that 3-bin system out, get the bring sites out, do the marketing and comms around it to get the participation levels up. But also because I guess part of it was a strong Labour authority, and also the money was there. They put in a central composting system using windrowing at the time. They worked with the universities to help guide them on that. Abertay University was involved with them. They spoke directly to the end markets because BP Davidson's was still on the go. That's where their paper was going to. But if I was honest, and I'll probably get into trouble from them now, the thing that was the barrier to it was once all of that was out and once you got to a certain recycling figure, the energy from waste plant became a barrier because it had a net minimum tonnage you had to put in the front door. And also, I guess, one of the issues would have been that you were supposed to go from the 3 vehicles running around picking up all the bins in different weeks to it would be 1 or 2 crews, So you'd have cut back on jobs and vehicles in order to use the same vehicles to do it. And the authority is not about taking jobs out. It was about keeping jobs in place. So if you didn't find the jobs to diversify them into, then there was another glass ceiling that capped any of the work I was doing. But the benefit to me was because it was a recycling city, people came from all over the world, if you can believe it, to visit Dundee because it was leading in recycling at that time. And my job was to show them around. And because I like talking, and because I like people, if someone said to me, do you know someone with a central composting scheme that's doing in-vessel composting? I could tell you, go to Antrim in Northern Ireland. Do you know someone who's done glass recycling and they're processing the material themselves? Who would you go see? I could remember the name of the people that came to see me, and I kept in touch with them, which gave me my little Waster's black book of go see that person, talk to that person, go do this. And at the same time, Alistair and Frank Mulgrew, Pete Goldie, Jim Lane said you should join CIWM. And I was a bit, I don't know that I want to do that. And they were like, why? And I was like, because they all look like you. And you all go play golf. And you're not really talking about recycling and stuff, but I did it because I thought the only way to change it is from the inside. So it was a great landing spot to go to, and because it was a strong Labour authority with money, it moved stuff forward quickly. So it was just good timing, and great thanks to Frank and Jim and Pete and these guys, as well as Alistair Lanham, who gave me the opportunity to. They just said, go do it. Tell us what you're doing.
I think that's part of what it is, isn't it? How long ago was, not wanting to put you on the spot, Duncan, but how long ago was that? What kind of time period are we talking about from then to now?
That's the, I guess, mid-1980s. Yeah. So it was. Well, I can tell you where the money came from because I can remember the press release. Mid-1980s was when I was doing my degrees. 90s would be when I started at Dundee, and that money came off the back of, do you remember Maggie Thatcher standing in Parliament Square with Richard Branson, and they were going to do all of the Tidying Up Britain and all of that? That's where the money came from, and it was BT funding that paid for it. So it was at a time when, yes, there'd been a tough period with recession prior to that. So getting a job coming out of uni wasn't easy. You got trapped in that. You're overqualified but no experience, or there's no jobs. So you just have to get on with it and write to as many people. And the famous get on your bike sort of idea, which I think Norman Tebbit said. But that boost of funding pushed a number of key cities out as beacon cities, and then others wanted to follow and learn from it. So it was a period of trial, I would call it, put out some bring sites, try some new bins, see what will happen, see how you can move things forward, and then how do you manage the quality and what do you do with the material off the back end of it.
It's a great place to get experience, Duncan, into it. That's for you.
Well, it had all the toys in the toy box, didn't it? Because it had an energy from waste plant. It had a landfill site. It had tough urban area with some areas of quite extreme social deprivation. The local councillors had quite a big sway, but it had this plan, and it had a good team, and it had a commitment to that team to take things forward. And they also managed to secure European funding. So we were able to bring partners from Germany, Ireland, and other cities that were wanting to move forward. And to have that form of collaboration at that sort of point in my career, as well as in my bag, I had town and regional planning, which, though I was quite derogatory about the subject, is a way of managing people from making a mess of how we develop and build our cities or manage our countryside, and to have some idea of how these things interact and where they go is a helpful thing to think about when you're thinking about waste as well. There's always a flow, to me, a flow of things, a flow of material, a flow of traffic, a flow of development. And if you don't understand it, then it can just go off on its own course. And then you've got to control it. And the minute you try and control it, everyone starts complaining.
Well, that leads on a bit to Valpac, Duncan. Could you maybe explain for listeners Valpac itself and how they operate, the space they operate? Because I think quite a lot of people, I know I struggle to understand what they actually do.
Yeah, so the Europeans came up with a piece of legislation. In fact, it was John Gummer. Lord Deben was the Secretary of State for Environment, and he was very pro-European, remains pro-European. But what he recognised was, and I gave you the kind of, it costs £6 a tonne to landfill something in Aberdeen at the time I started, and it was £47 a tonne for paper recycling. But at exactly the same time as I was the recycling officer, I was trying to sell paper to Muggy Moss Mill, and there were ships coming from Germany offering £20 a tonne for Muggy Moss to take the paper. And the guy from the paper plant was saying to me, look, I want to take your paper locally, but I've got this person offering me 20 quid a tonne to take their paper, which I have to take to compete in the market. And if I overpay you and that paper goes off, then my mill will shut. So I have to take the export paper that's coming to us. And John Gummer saw this, and what he said was, what you need to do is flatten the market right across the European spectrum and introduce a piece of legislation that pushes material out at the same rate, so that one country doesn't flood another country with material. So they brought in the European Packaging Directive, and what it basically said to member states is, by this point in time, you need to recycle this amount of your packaging buying material, so paper, glass, aluminium, steel, wood, plastic. And if you don't do that, then we'll fine you. But how you do it is up to you. So the majority of European countries set up a monopoly scheme. So in Germany, the DSD, which was the system that was pumping out all of this paper and card and other material. In France, you have eco-emballage, but in the UK, they thought they were going to go down that road, and industry got together and said, well, we'll set up our little monopoly vehicle, the vehicle to deliver these regulations for us, because we're all shopkeepers and people who make things. And we'll call it Valpac. And the name Valpac comes from valorization of packaging. So make value from the material you collect. Don't just collect it. And it's a unique piece of legislation in the UK, because what it means is if you go to Tesco, Sainsbury's, Coca-Cola, Simpson's Label Company, Bond's Packaging, I can say to you, you can do this job yourself. And if you get it wrong, you add up the numbers incorrectly, you don't buy the right amount of evidence of recycling, you get fined. But I'll do it for you, and I'll send you a bill for it. But if I get it wrong, I get fined on your behalf. So it's quite a motivating factor for me to do the job well for you. And it's the only piece of environmental legislation you can outsource to a third party. So the way that it works is, if you think of an accounting T-bar, you go to Tesco and you say, add up everything you put on the market last year and multiply it by the weight of the packaging. And you get a number for paper, card, aluminium, steel, and so on. And by the end of the year, once you've multiplied it by the target, you have to have bought an equivalent amount of evidence from reprocessors, so glass plants, aluminium smelts, steel mills. And as long as one number matches the other, then no problem. And the money is paid for the evidence, and it goes through the reprocessor. And we say to the reprocessor, you know your material better than anyone. You know how to get it, you know how to process it, you know how to make the thing with the recycled content. So you invest that money in the system, and you can do that by either paying a price for the material, making the plant more up to date, tackling contamination, processing more material, make it a bigger factory, or subsidize your recycled content material. And that creates a pull. So the higher the step to the target, the higher the value of the evidence, because there's less of it, and it pulls material out of the system. And that, to me, was brilliant, because it was the reverse of Germany, which was get that much material collected by this date. It just pushed material out. It didn't say, and find a home for it, and do something with it. It just said, that's your problem, get rid of it. The thing that caught us out was we thought we'd be the only scheme, and then they said it'll be a competitive scheme. So to begin with, we were planning 3 to 5 years ahead, and then we had to bring it down to you're fighting with others in the market over a 12-year period, 12-month period. And competition's a good thing, but what it meant was it made the market a bit more volatile. It made it tougher, but that's good because it makes you think harder. It makes you think, how do I innovate? How do I keep my market share? How do I keep going? So the packaging scheme is a scheme that's there to make the producer pay for the material they put on the market, and you're there to help deliver the value that should come from that and deliver on behalf of the government.
So how many schemes exist at the moment then?
So at one point there was about 20 odd,
Right.
but once it's a bit like armies in the world, once you get past the first 4 or 5, they tail off in size. So there were ones that came out of waste management companies because they were doing the waste, and their clients said, can you set up a scheme for us? There were ones that were based on material. So there was one for the dairy sector, one for the paper sector. And then there were ones that were based on a kind of budget offering, you know, kind of EasyJet, Ryanair type of thing. And then there were others that were there because they wanted to deliver to the blue chip companies as well as everyone else. Valpak at the time was very lucky that they were a brand new company. They had clever people in the organization and inspirational people at many levels, you know, and I mean, the average age of that company when I was in it was 21. And believe me, I was distorting the age by a long, long way. But they were hugely enthusiastic for delivering the job, and they wanted to get it done and deliver to really tight deadlines and to watch people work that hard, you know. So it was another brilliant, just lucky for me, it was another brilliant place to land at just the right point in time, because I would never have had the opportunities I had at Valpak, you know, anywhere else. To get into Tesco and see what they do, to understand the speed that cans come off the line in Coca-Cola, to set up a scheme from scratch, to help input and design the data systems. There's stuff that I've been able to do there that I would never have had the opportunity to do elsewhere. Yes, it was quite high pressure, but a good type of pressure, I would say 80% of the time. Sometimes not so good.
I think it's really interesting thinking of it as a flow, Duncan, isn't it? So all these producers are making all this product that's getting placed on the market, and then that material then flows into the waste system, and then the various companies are trying to do what they need to do it. And I think sometimes that bit gets forgotten, doesn't it? That it's not.
Yeah, so I've always tried to explain waste as, you know, if you say to someone, here's a bucket of sand, here's 3 eggs, and here's some sugar, and you mix it all together, and then say, okay, Alistair, Jane, your job's to get that apart now, and get it apart to the point that it looks like the sand, the sugar, and the eggs again. But to do that, you need to know how much the volume of ingredients is that goes in to begin with. And you then need to work out where it lands up. And you then need to work out how do you get it out. And how do you stop it getting mixed up to begin with? And our industry aggregates and disaggregates material throughout the process, and all of these other people in the chain think of themselves as, I'm a shopkeeper, I'm a grocer, I'm a soft drinks manufacturer, I'm a bacon supplier, I'm a building and construction supplier, merchant, I'm a construction company. When you start going into it, I mean, the trade associations that you would have to find to then say, okay, I need to tackle this issue of understanding how much material is related to toys and hobbies. You start speaking to them, and you find out who they are, what they do, where they buy their products from, do they make them, how do they come up with the packaging, do they make it themselves, or does someone supply it to them? And then what happens after that? Where does it go? Is it sold through wholesalers? Is it sold directly? Is it their own shops? They're in that world, and you're in the waste world, and you have to bridge the two, and producer responsibility is a good way of bridging the two. Because you might say, I know you don't like this, but I want you to understand the legislation, because the more you understand it, the more you'll do something about it that makes a difference. You can't just pay the bill. If you pay the bill, fine, but I would like you to understand it, because you can do things that will make a difference for you, and they'll probably save you money, and they'll probably make your business more interesting. Do you think flows and data have always been an interest of mine?
Do you think that type of scheme has lost its way slightly, or what's the next big thing then? What's the next to move things forward?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, under producer responsibility, we've got end-of-life vehicles, we've got packaging, we've got waste electricals and electronics, we've got batteries and accumulators. If I was a betting man, I'd say the next one that will come will be textiles and clothing. But in Canada, they have a kind of household hazardous waste one as well. Covers paints, antifreeze, materials like that. You can mattresses would be another one that would seem to make sense. Tires, they're a great way of saying that's a problematic material. We'll define it in this way. We'll say by this date at that time, you have to have collected this much of it in this way and do something good with it. And if you don't hit that number, you'll get fined. To set a scheme on it is then really good, because that scheme just focuses on that flow of material. Where does it go from? Where does it go to? Who does it? What can we do that gets the most value from it? And I don't mean just pounds. They do concentrate on environmental measurements and carbon as well. But they know so much about it that you then end up, they can identify problems very quickly. So that PRN market, much as people like to kick it around, it would very quickly tell you where there's a failure in the market. So if Turkey and North Africa and these people, because of wars and other things, stop building things, then the steel flow, or if the car industry goes on a downturn, the flow of steel and aluminium and plastic starts to, push back in the UK. So it leads you very quickly to what's the problem, and they can often say maybe the solution is to do this. The biggest benefit it had was the price goes up really, really quickly, and start pumping money into the system to get it to move the material and start the innovation. So producer responsibility, I think, is a very good thing. It has to be managed well. The problem with it recently is it's just been in a hiatus. It's a bit of a reflection of policy and legislation overall. There's been a lot of policy suggested and a lot of policy put forward.
And a lot of policy not implemented, Duncan.
Yeah, so I think the other day when we were chatting, I think I said something and you went, no, surely not. And I said, I think there has not been a significant piece of legislation since the Waste Scotland regulations. Yeah. Okay, we've banned certain types of disposable litter, and we do have the biodegradable landfill ban coming up, but the last bit of significant bang that'll affect a lot of people think about the flow of material was Waste Scotland regs. That was 10 years ago.
12 almost. 20,
there's been a
2012
hiatus, and of course there's been COVID, and of course there's been the war in Ukraine and all of these other things, but there has been this hiatus, and to me that stops momentum.
Yeah,
it stops innovation, doesn't it? And you know, or you get the innovation, but then there's nothing to put in it.
Well, actually, Jane, I think look at some of the people we know. Private companies have kept innovating. They got a hard time about it, but they've gone, if we have to keep surviving in this sector through COVID and everything else, they have done stuff. So a lot of them have implemented new data systems that have on-vehicle weighing. I know that's not new stuff, but for them to have it is new. They're looking at the flows of material. We've seen, Topolytics and others come along that are looking at digital data. We've seen new reprocessors appearing. There's a dearth of people looking at chemical recycling, which has been around for quite some time, but they're trying to get it to work. It's not the easiest thing to get to work, but we have seen activity happening, and I think that's private companies and others saying we just need to get on with it. And I guess my other observation would be, because I don't want to sound like I'm down on the government or others, but I think the Recycling Improvement Fund is making a difference. I mean, I look at just the new bin that I've been given here to put my cardboard and paper in, and the stuff does look markedly cleaner in the dry recyclate container. And it's probably capturing that brown card and other material at a higher level than before. So I'm intrigued to see what the data is that comes out the back end of these changeovers. But to me, that emphasises you also need government to fund local government who deliver a core quality of services within waste in Scotland and elsewhere. And you also need the money ring-fenced, because it lets them spend the money on what it was supposed to be spent on.
Absolutely.
So there has been stuff it's just not moving at the speed we need it to move at, is my opinion.
Yeah, perhaps you're right. It's just slow. It just, we seem to have, we've obviously implemented stuff in mid 1980s, early 1991. We did the recycling recovery, we did, massive changes in increasing recycling, but now we're kind of at the level where something else needs to happen. There needs to be a step change for us to get more recycling, more recovery, more reuse, more waste minimisation. And it's that step change, I think.
It's, I mean, another example would be what John Ferguson says. I'll trip up over this word, but he says we're awful at operationalising policy, and I agree with him. We got a great idea, but the time frame it takes between the idea and delivering it is incredible length of time. And how we help businesses innovate is not very good. It doesn't work well. It's a bit of clunky support that we give. Part of that's the way the funding's structured, but the example I'd give is when Valpak won the contract to put out the network of collection sites across the UK for waste electricals and electronics. We've got 6 months to do that, and we did it. They told us in January, you've got it. Now get all of the household waste recycling centres signed up to take at least 5 containers, or try to get 5 containers for the 5 streams of waste. And 98% of the authorities signed up, and 99% of them were collecting the vast majority of the streams. The only restriction was size of site.
Yeah, I suppose you go into the waste recycling centres and you do see all your different containers, and you've got your WEEE and all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
And that was just a thing that was, your company signed up and said it would do that by that time. So it would have been a failing of the company not to get there. But were we pedaling fast to get that to happen? My goodness, we were pedaling fast. But was it exciting? Yeah, it was great. It's brilliant to see it.
You just need a push and a deadline, and not these deadlines to keep bloody moving.
I think every boss will turn around to you. If you go in and say, I'd like to do that, or we need to do that, and say, why do I need to do it? What will happen to me if I don't do it? And how much is it going to cost me? Those 3 things make stuff happen.
Well, that maybe takes me to the next question, Duncan. In terms of favourite role or project, any fond memories of anything that may have occurred?
Like I say, I love the opportunity I had at Dundee to put out the kind of blueprint for a 3-bin recycling system. That was great. Really loved that. My first job at Valpak was project officer, and for 2 years I went in and worked with BP and Shanks and McEwen to build a feasibility study for polymer cracking. And ultimately they built a pilot plant at Grangemouth that could turn plastics back into hydrocarbon again. Brilliant to be involved in that and do all the work around it and work with process engineers. And I mean, these guys at Grangemouth that built the plant, I mean, it's just such clever people, but listening to how they do things and what they do and how they do it, and working with Shanks at that time, Shanks Northern, was really good. You know, Ken Moran and you know, John Harris and all of the guys there were really supportive of the project. So that was great. I loved that. When front of store kind of kicked off on how do we get recycling in front of store of retailers, that was another thing that I was delighted about. Was my boss let me spend money to try and invent a new recycling bank. So me and two of my colleagues, one of them, my boss, who I'm indebted to from Valpak, he's a wonderful guy, Steve Goff, and a colleague of mine from up here, Andrew McCaffrey, we invented the Rescape Bank. So that was quite a fascinating thing to go. So say invented sounds like it was an incredible machine, but basically you just put a nice, good-looking casing on the outside of 1280 containers. And it stopped the banks creeping across the car park because it kept them in like a stable and it made them look different and it lit them at night. So if you're an individual going to a recycling centre at night, my thought behind it was that's quite a horrible place to go, like overflowing skips in the dark corner of a retail site. Why not light them? And then you can put advertising on them and you can do that sort of thing. So for someone to let me have the money to do that was great. And it also taught me about intellectual property rights and copyright and all of these things as well. So several, I could go on and on and on and on.
I think this is the first time ever, Duncan, somebody has referred to a stable for bins.
Exactly.
Yeah, just make sure you shut the door before the bins get out.
Exactly.
So we've had your favourite project. What about the worst thing you've done, or you know, any disasters you've had, you know, over your time? Is there any?
So in Gordon District, I was very lucky that my boss there, George Niblock, let me and pushed me to deliver change on waste minimisation, reuse and recycling. He's one of the only people that put those two R's in front of the recycling. But the story I'll relate to is about, I wanted to get a focus for the recycling and aluminium buyback centres, and the work that Rick Hindley and AluPro, Alex Griffin and these guys were doing at that time was really supportive. But George let me have the money to build an aluminium buyback centre. So I say, build an aluminium buyback centre. I went and I said, so who's the architecture department at Gordon District? And he said, oh, I'm not really sure, but go see this guy. So, because I helped the architects when I was a planner in Dundee, I did some drawings of what I thought it should look like. And I did a site plan because I'd done my surveying. And I did an elevation and a graphic of what it should look like. And I went in and I showed the guy this stuff. And I said, I need someone to build that. And he said, oh, you've done a really good job there. You should just get it as a design and build. And I'm like, look, I can draw a picture, but I'm not telling you the thing's going to stand up at the end of it. And he said, oh, no, they'll do that. They'll do that. Anyway, they started a design and build for that buyback centre at the Inverurie Household Waste Recycling Centre. And this will get us into the dialect question that I think you ask sometimes as well. And I got a local contractor come out and do the site works. And I was very nervous because I was thinking, these are my drawings and this is my stuff. And I've never built a building. In fact, I couldn't put IKEA shelves up. I couldn't do any of that. And now I'm flying by the seat of my pants. And this lovely local builder guy rocked up on site. And I said, look, I have no idea what's under the ground here. So it's like, it's all right. I'll just get a wee tickle with the JCB and here, look. And he ripped off the back of the sewage pipe of the men's welfare hut. And then he dug up the main power cable for Inverurie, and all the lights went out in Inverurie.
Oh, no.
And the next minute, my phone started ringing. And the dulcet tones of George Niblock came on and said, "My lights have gone off. In fact, all the lights have gone off. What's going on?" And I was like, "George, this guy came and he just dug up stuff on the ground and he leapt out of his JCB and just ran off." So I was left on the site with a JCB with the mains power cable for Inverurie hanging off it and sewage pouring out the back of that. That was not a good day.
Not a good day, no. Obviously,
And
it's
I
all
did
all
contemplate following the guy and just running off into the distance.
I'm trying to remember, Duncan. Gordon District is effectively Murray Council, is that right?
No, there was Gordon District was the small authority in the middle.
Right.
Ballincollig was above it, and Kincardine and Deeside was below it, and all three came together to be Aberdeenshire. And it was at that time I jumped ship because it was local government reorganisation, and when some was saying, son, get another 15, 20 years, it'll all calm down. I was like, I cannot stand this, because they were supposed to be reorganising it to get rid of, in my opinion, 4 chief executives and have 1, and a number of directors and have so many. And they all hung on to their jobs and they made more political areas, and it just seemed to get more bureaucratic. And the people a bit further down the bottom of the tree, I think, took a bit of a kicking. And also, though I understand bigger can mean you maybe have wider experience or whatever, the way that the jobs were put in, for my opinion, I might be wrong, was on a political basis and who would toe the line. And I was pushing my boss at the time to stick his head above the parapet to say this is a load of nonsense, and he kept getting his head shot off, and I thought that's not good for him. No. And when the job came, well, the job didn't come up at Valpac. I wrote to Valpac and asked for a job, but that was me. I knew I would create trouble there if I didn't get out. But did I love public sector? I did. And I think what the public sector do in terms of public service, when they really get that public service, it's incredible. And I mean that for civil servants, people in local government, they carry a hell of a burden of the country and they deliver some fantastic services. And it's a thankless task because they're an easy target. But did I get great experience from it? Oh, absolutely, yeah. And were they really wonderful people? Yeah.
Moving on, how do you find your role has changed your opinions and habits out with the workplace? Do you feel you have to champion the recycling, the environment a bit, or can you be quite relaxed about that?
Where I am now is an enviable position for quite a number of people. I mean, I worked hard through local government and at Valpac, and I ended up in a situation that it gave me a bit more choice as to what I could do. So obviously setting up my own company was a bit worrying, but I've done it and it's great. But it let me, in theory, give something back. So the trustee role at CIWM helps me do that. That's more about the direction of the organisation, making sure we cater for all the membership within that and look after those members through their career switch, as you know, is very close to my heart. And I really enjoy that work and enjoy the people I work with there. And health and safety is such a huge issue, you know. And in my time, I've seen people crushed in balers, run over by vehicles, hit by falling bales, fires, all sorts of stuff. You just need to stay on top of that and improve it and improve it and improve it. But your area of expertise as well, Alistair, I know you have a lot of expertise across a wide range of things, but that education, training and competence, it was a teacher that said to me, and I only realised his wife's words when it was too late, I guess. He said to me, "You're not going to be good at everything, Duncan. You keep trying to be good at everything. You can't do that. If you can find one thing within either work or outside of work and become enthusiastic about it, love it, you'll get more in life from that than you will from trying to do things that you're not good at. And waste has become one of those things for me, but I enjoy music. I enjoy doing my garden. I enjoy movies a great deal. I'm always telling Yaz the next series she should watch on Netflix or Paramount or something like that. I love all of those things, and they chill me out, they let me relax. But I have always loved the countryside and always loved the environment, and I do want to see it looked after, and I do want to see it become a better place. So I'm not kind of Prince Charles, let's drive forward with the most sophisticated engine in the world, but I want it in a Morris Minor Traveller body. I just want to see us use our brains and use our commitment to make our communities and protect our environment and sustainability. And working out how to do that is really interesting to me. And I've seen some fantastic examples of it. And I think some of the community funding that's come out recently that's been used over the past number of years is great. I think some of the steps forward we've taken in renewables and other areas is great. But we need to do more about demonstrating the value of amenity. I think people, finally, the penny dropped on that with COVID. When you were told you sit in your house for this amount of time, but half an hour a day you can go outside and walk around your local area. I'm very lucky. I live quite close to the countryside, but it made me appreciate it more than ever. If I'd been in a flat in the middle of Glasgow, I'm not sure how I would have survived, but it would let you know the bits of Glasgow where there's open spaces and amenity that would have become very precious to you, you know. That, I think, has been kind of my biggest learning, is try to look after the place that's round about you, try to engage people in the value of it, because it links to all those other things we've talked about: mental health, well-being, appreciation of others, empathy, all these things. So that, I've had more time to think about stuff like that, but I guess it's because I've had more time to sit in it rather than airports and train stations.
So we're kind of going, you've got your current role now in your business. So what kind of thing are you looking to do, you know, in that current role? What you're trying to achieve, and again, the next step for you, where do you want to go next, really?
So I guess with RMAS, I wanted to highlight the important part of the infrastructure that SMEs bring to Scotland and elsewhere. Many of these are family businesses. Many of these are businesses that have been in one geographical location for quite a long period of time. They're not going to view that area as Region 1, Region 2, Region 3. You know, that's their area where they work, and that's where their customers are. And they will operate in that area come hell or high water, and they will create jobs there, and they'll create opportunity there, and they will create value there. And therefore we should recognize that, because I guess under the pressure of how do you deliver a more carbon friendly industry, they probably have a role to play in that. The difficulty they have is they don't carry a lot of reserves. And I mean, Alistair, you'll probably know this, as a small business, you don't have a lot of reserves. So where you spend that money is incredibly important. And you seem very good in involving your staff in the direction of that business going forward, and supporting them in terms of saying, look, you take that on, you do that, take that forward. I see the SMEs have that a lot more, and it's a lot easier, I guess, because it feels more of a family than a bigger business. And I also think it makes you more adaptable and more bespoke. So that was my key goal with RMAS, was give them a more sophisticated voice, explain the role they play, explain the value they play, and network them and coordinate them to underline how critical it is to keep those little joins in the map of the flows in place. Otherwise, you'll end up with one choice, two choice, and it won't be a good solution.
Yeah.
I like the work we're doing at Switch. If I thought waste was complicated, education, training, and competence is just about blowing my head up on occasions. But I think we are getting there. But I agree with Withers in terms of it should be for industry to dictate what sort of skills and qualifications it wants and needs. The Scottish Government should then deliver that. And the only thing I'd ask of industry then is put your blooming people on these courses, put your money in the budget for training and send people on their training courses. And if the money's not spent, then give it to the people that want trained. Don't say, oh, well, that person didn't go, therefore I'll snaffle the money back. It's send them on the courses. Why it should be down to a group of volunteers to help kick that along is an absolute disgrace. And I will continue to go into MSPs and others and say, we need to sort this out. Because the one thing I'm sure you can have picked up over my conversation is I absolutely adore this industry, and I have met some wonderful people within it from all sorts of backgrounds who either fell in it, were pushed in it, couldn't get out of it, but they have so many skills, so much experience, such a diverse range of occupational opportunities. Why we are not better at saying, this is our industry, come into it. We need to get our act together there, and that will be part of the role that I want to do at CIWM, is encourage more and more people to come into it. And I include circular economy and all of these phrases, which I know upset some people. I've listened to other podcasts, and there's this tension between what see themselves as the traditional and then the new. In my opinion, I see no difference between either side. I basically, if you're an individual in a yard in Aviemore who's had some plastic dropped on the floor from a big client that needs to find a home, your problem solving to either say, don't make it in the first instance, or change the material, or find a good reprocessor, or work with the client to get to a solution is no different from the person appearing with a business startup idea on how to deal with that type of material. It's how we support them that is the key thing.
It's the terminology as well, isn't it? And making sure, that people call things different things. And circular economy is a new thing, but it's not really. It's called...
It's a language thing, Jane. Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah,
it's a language thing. And the language is important, because if you disenfranchise one group because you make them feel that they're the ones that created the problem, and I'm not saying we've been a perfect industry, but if you disenfranchise one group, they tend to put up a barrier. I loved meeting individuals from another European country. I won't say it in case they think I'm stereotyping them, but they said, oh, we just tell people to do that in our country and they do it. And I said, if you tell someone in Scotland to do it, I'm guarantee you they'll probably say, I'm not doing it. You have to cajole them a certain direction or tell them that this is what's in it for me. But for me, CIWM, then that role is about developing the professional body going forward to cater for everyone and to make it more membership friendly, to attract more women into the industry. Jane, we've got more now than ever before, but we need even more. And we need people from more diverse backgrounds, but we need to take everyone forward in that. So I think, Adam Reid's phrase of you need to become a bridge is important. I probably kicked George and Alistair when they were on the Centre Council and said, you guys are really annoying and you don't talk about what I want to talk about. And they became a bridge for me. They made that bridge. They connected us. Ken Moran as well, I've mentioned. I now think, am I a really annoying person that's stopping people getting across the bridge? And I think my job is to be that bridge as well. And I think the one thing that CIWM has done, and that link through CIWM, is it provides you with a family that you can talk to through your career, and they'll help you on the way. So yes, of course, you can have moments where you fall out with family members or you don't agree with them, but they're still your family and they're still there and you move forward with them. And the other third of my life is my parents are quite elderly now, and my son was a a baby when I started at Valpak, and he just handed in his PhD last Wednesday. So I'm also spending more time with my family and doing the things I like to do. So kind of a third the work, a third the voluntary stuff, and a third look after my family and enjoy family. And work to becoming an even more annoying old man.
Oh, you're not annoying, Duncan, not at all. So I think I'm just thinking we've got a fact you want to share from your job that people might not know. You must have lots of facts, Duncan. Can we have any? You must have lots of how much plastic gets recycled, or paper, or market share, or anything like that. Sounds like.
Yeah, so I mean, it always amazed me. I mean, I was once introduced onto a stage as the dark forces of packaging. It felt a bit like Darth Vader, and I understand it has a high carbon impact. I understand, it's often the litter we see blown around the streets, but actually, those producer responsibility organizations over the period of time are now up at 60% of that packaging overall, and more being recovered and recycled. Paper up at 70%, plastic at about 45%, and over half of it now recycled in the UK. So actually, in terms of where we were and where we are now, we've come a long way. That's not saying we don't need to do that. Mm-hmm. A fact I learned about Dundee, which actually, one of my colleagues looked up. The person that I would have said was the first recycling officer in Dundee was employed to clear animal manure from the medieval town centre. And the part-time job they had was they were the executioner at the weekend. So when I started in Dundee, they said, I've had that removed from your job description. But there were times, believe me, there were some people I would have liked to have executed. But that was quite an interesting thing. And the only other weird fact about me that I don't think people would do, and it's not work related, but normally I do this as my icebreaker, which is being of that certain age, Jane, you'll maybe remember, the first 501s advert where the really handsome guy goes into the laundry and stripped off. Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh. So he was Nick Kamen. He's my second cousin.
Oh, really? Oh,
which I'm amazed you haven't noticed because of my good looks as well. But that normally astounded a few people, was why do you look the way you do when he's so lovely?
I wasn't going to say something about, well, you haven't taken your trousers off in front of me, Duncan, or anything like that. So.
Yeah, that's a Christmas party we've not been at the same time, James. So.
Okay, moving on.
I like the executioner one, Duncan. I like that one.
Yeah.
So your favourite bit of slang dialect that you've learnt over the years?
So I love Scottish words. I mean, smurry rain, I think, is a fantastic description. Thrawn is a word that I love because you learn that a lot in this industry. There's a few Thrawn people out there. Aberdeenshire. Thrawn means you won't shift. Stubborn. You're just stuck in your ways. He's very Thrawn. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's another one to add to my list.
My mother has been known to call me Thrawn, Jane. You'll be surprised to know.
I can't believe that of her, Alistair. That's why would you say that?
I don't understand it. And
obviously, Aberdeenshire, I just loved Doric. It took me a really long time to actually work out what the heck people were saying to me. And there's a famous phrase there of fit ski, which is the kind of what ski fits what leg. But and I also love that Aberdeenshire thing of them punctuating the end of the sentence with a vast intake of breath. So they'll say, it's a fine day, son. And you hear that noise and you think, what is that noise? But that's a very Scottish kind of me having a think about the world. I love those sorts of things. And I love the Glasgow word numpty. I love that. I've had that word said about me on a few occasions. And then
we're probably meant to allow you one here, Duncan. You've rattled through about 5 here.
There's other phrases I can't repeat, but you'll know what they are, but they always make me laugh when I hear them.
Just second last question. We're going to give you a magic wand to deal with the waste management sector as you see fit? What would you like to use it for?
So I think, again, we should have strong legislation which has clear targets, clear dates, and clear repercussions if you don't deliver it. And at the moment, some of the targets are pretty weak, and if we don't get them, then there's not a lot of repercussion. I think if we are going to have funding for local government, and they deserve a bit more funding around resources and waste, and yes, there's been a recycling improvement fund, but that delivery of infrastructure normally puts stuff out that should be ring fenced. I'll say pay as you throw, because that upsets everyone, but I think it does make a difference, and I see people pop up and go, oh, Flanders is amazing and this place is amazing, but they never ever say, and by the way, they get charged for their disposal bin, which normally is a key driver. I'm glad the circular economy bill is at least acknowledging through the route map that it'll look a bit more into that. I'd like to see stuff like that happen, and I would love to see the sector, as I say, get better at moving from the policy ideas into operationalizing those ideas, getting stuff to happen. But normally, to get that to happen, you need to have a supportive system that welcomes people in and says, you can build that there because there's that much material in this place at that place. And that's another thing I'd like to see, is all of the publicly funded data and research that was in Zero Waste Scotland made available to the public.
You've only got one magic wand, Duncan.
Well,
you know me.
I say put your hand in the bag once for a sweetie, Duncan. I'll always take out 5 or 6.
I like that one about making the data public, Duncan. Was I think SEPA, Zero Waste Scotland. I think the more that data's publicly available, the better, basically.
Use it and they'll innovate from it. And at the moment, it's designed in a way to say the recycling rate is X and it was calculated like that. That's no use to someone wanting to collect tyres. I want to know where they are, who's got them, how many are there, who takes them in it, what price do they move it from, because then maybe I can come up with something better. And if you just released it, it would help.
I think it's the time you wait for the information to be released as well. How long it takes, whereas if the data was already there, you could have a look rather than having to wait for ages and get the information that you don't actually really need.
I agree. And I know part of it is the politics of releasing information and where it goes, but I just think the value of it is an asset to Scotland and people in the industry, and they should release it.
Yeah, and our last question, after we've kind of given you our 20 questions and mastermind, is what advice would you give to the young people coming into this sector? We talked about trying to bring more people in and younger generation. Why would you say come do waste instead of go and do IT or town and country planning? How do we get them in? What do we need to do?
I think for me, everyone can relate to waste in one way or other because it's in our house. We create it. I think that's why people have so many opinions on it, because they see it and they talk about their recycling system or what happens in their place, and they tell you all the conspiracy theories as well. But come in and learn about it for yourself, and learn about it from that flow angle and find what it is that really interests you. There's then an amount of luck. If you land at Albion, then you've got a great company with a really nice set of people that are very supportive. To get all of that in one go, plus the job that interests you, doesn't always happen. But if you can find the place that works for you, both from a personal point of view and a professional point of view, it's great. And the best way to find that out is to meet people and network. And the one thing I think about our sector is it's got really great people in it, and they genuinely want to help other people. I've never been at an event where I've gone, come over and meet this woman called Jane. She's very good at this, that, and the other. I'm sure she would speak to you about that. And I come over and I say, could I get you, Jane, to speak to this young person about X, Y, and Z that you've gone, no, get knotted. I think I'd like to drink my coffee in peace. Yeah, absolutely. Everyone spends time and effort. And if it's not them, then they'll put them in touch with someone else. So it's a very welcoming industry. We need to get better at telling them what the opportunities are. And we also need to get better. And I think, you know, Alistair, you've sort of put this thought in my head, is that we need to get better at enabling people to come into it as well from all levels, you know, not just graduates, not just, you know, people with a lot of experience from other sectors. We need it from the grassroots up, and we need to show them that it's not just picking stuff off a belt. We need to make those jobs more interesting and better. And I think robotics and all of these things will help change those jobs over, because drivers have moved from being drivers to drivers that are drivers, but they also use tablets and electronics to say where they are, what they're doing, how the vehicle's running, how efficient is it, when does it need repaired next, why was the miss. The jobs have a lot more to them now at all levels, but we need to get better at supporting that. So it would be that geography teacher, James Mitchell, said to me, find that thing that you're enthusiastic about, find that thing that you fall in love with, and you'll get a lot from it. And there's a lot of people in this industry that are enthusiastic, love it, they have people help them.
We probably just need to start sharing this podcast with the guidance teachers at schools, really, Duncan. That's what we really need to do.
Yeah, your podcast has gone a long way to making a difference, because it is honestly like, I record them, I put them on in my car, or when I'm walking the dog, I listen to them. And it's honestly like just having two people sat in your living room chatting about the sector. And it reminds me of the days of sitting and listening to John Peel, or, listening to a good radio play. They're absorbing and they're interesting. So it's gone a long way to that, and it's intriguing that 3 or 4 people have copied you now, which is it's a compliment that people copy Alistair.
I view that as a compliment.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, thank you very much, Duncan, for your time. Very much appreciated.
Thank you both, Alistair, Jane. That was really enjoyable. Thank you very much for setting it up, and I hope I was a good substitute for you, Alistair.
Absolutely.